Okay, so I'm back, and what we're going to do is right now we basically have built a form around this link, and we're going to hijack this link. And the way that I'm going to do this is that I am going to add an HTML parameter to put a class on this link, and this is something I often do, where if I want my link to act as a post, I'll wrap it in a form, I'll hijack it, but in order to identify the link, I'll put in a class. Now it's important that you put the @ symbol here because class is a reserved word in C#, and I'll say class. I'll usually call this something like post link. Now what I'm going to do here is, we haven't really done this before, but again, a lot of what you end up doing with jQuery is you're basically subscribing to events that are in the DOM. Now, what I'm going to do, since I really only need to have this JavaScript execute once, I'm going to put my code here on the index page. Okay, so this is going to render on the server, and up here on my index page, I'm going to put in a script tag, and I'm going to do this after the DOM has finished loading. So I'm on my index page. I'm going to put this in. And I want to grab those post links. So sometimes what I'll do, just to see that I was able to grab them, is to do something like a.postlink.hide, just to see that they disappear. I see I was able to find them. And if I go back to this page, actually close some of these windows out, close these out. So I might do something like start this debug, start without debugging, and I'll see that that link is hidden. Again, if I go in here, I'm going to see that the link is there. It's being hidden on the client side, right? It's just, here's my form, but here's that link. Okay, so I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is what I would like to do is to hijack that link, and the way that I'm going to do that is that I can subscribe to the click event, and the way that I subscribe to the click event is that I take that collection, I say, hey, when it's clicked on, call this function. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just pop up an alert for the moment. So just be aware of your parentheses and your brackets, right? This is what's known as a anonymous function in JavaScript. It's a function without a name, right? Keyword function, parentheses, and a code block. Okay? And what will happen is that this is going to get wired up to all of these links. Internally, this is all native JavaScript that does it in the DOM, but jQuery just makes it a little bit more painless. And if I do this here, there's a couple things I want you to notice. So now I've got my delete links, okay? If I click on this, I get this alert, but what's going to happen is that this is going to pop up, okay? But it's still going to go and try to do that href, and it's going to go here, and since it's a post, right? Since it's a get, it's going to say that that can't be found. Now what I'm going to do this in a couple of different parts. I'm going to go in here, okay? And I'm going to say link equals. What you end up getting here, if I was to do an alert, what I would find out is that the word this, and it's called the context in JavaScript, the word this is not really going to be all that meaningful, but this is actually going to be my DOM element. A probably even better idea is to say console log this. Now I don't want this to execute, so I'm always going to return false from here. So the thing that happens when you end up attaching an event handler to a jQuery collection, the word this inside of your event handler, okay? So I'm going to open up the console here in Firebug. So there's this panel for Firebug, and I'm going to click on delete. So it's actually showing me console.log this. This is the link itself. And what I want to do from this link is grab this href, okay? So to me, the thing that I like to do is usually when I end up getting something from here, I could do a lot more with the DOM element when I have it wrapped in jQuery, because there's a lot more things that I could call on it. So usually I'll do something like link equals $this. So another thing you could do with the $sign is if you give it a DOM element, it'll create a jQuery collection of one with that DOM element. Okay? And what I want to do is now I want to take that link, and I want to take that link, okay? And what I can do, another thing that I could do with jQuery is I could go up the tree. So this is a DOM element, and I'm going to look at parents, and I'm going to find form, okay? So this is an overloaded method. I could loop over all the parents, but if I pass in a selector, it'll start looping up the form, and it'll find all the parents that have a form. Now, you don't want to have nested forms anyway. I only have one form that's around that link, right? So I say link.parents.form. And what I'm going to do is I had told you I'm going to basically hijack it. And I'm going to set the action, because a form has an action, okay? And I'm going to take my link. So one of the things you can do is you could get any attribute by using the attribute method in jQuery. So here I'm going to be setting an attribute. I'm going to be setting the action attribute, and I'm going to be getting the attribute from the href of the link. And again, I could have done this in a couple of different steps, but I wanted to try to do it in a reasonable amount of time on here. So you could also, if you want to read this a little bit better, you could do something like, you know, setting the attribute here. What are you setting it with? You're setting it with this. That might be a little bit easier for folks to read. Well, you could break it up in a couple of different parts too. I could also say var form equals link.parents form, right? One thing to note here, if you have any errors in your JavaScript, it's going to basically just stop executing, and it's going to end up trying to have that link follow whatever the href is, which is going to cause an exception. So here, just to make this even a little bit easier to look at, I could say, you know, form dot attribute action is link dot attribute href, and then once I do that, I can go and submit my form. So again, I mean, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but in the end, you end up using, one of the things you use jQuery for is to basically attach events to elements in the DOM. Here I'm able to attach them to all these links, right? Because this is a collection. When this gets clicked on, okay, I'm going to call this function. So this is delayed execution, right? I don't control when this function gets called. It's going to happen when the user clicks on one of those links. When the user clicks on the links, this points to the link that they clicked on. It seems reasonable. I'm going to grab the parent form. I'm going to set the action. Okay. I'm using the attribute of the, if I have a jQuery object, I can use attribute and get these values, and then I'm going to submit the form. Now when I do that, and I click on delete, this should work. Now we're going to eventually do this with jQuery, so we're not going to, but I could go and delete all these items, and that's going to work just fine, right? Again, when I rebuild this, I'm going to get all these guys back anyway, okay? Right? Okay. If I could have sworn that, no, okay, it must have been on L before. All right, I thought I was losing my mind. Okay, so what I want to do here, so I've been able to hijack that link. Okay, now, again, just giving you, this is, you know, a pretty quick introduction into jQuery, how it ends up working with MVC, and it plays pretty well with it. What I want to do now is I'm going to do an update where right now, if I click on these links, you'll notice that, you know, reloads the entire page. I mean, you can see it here, right? If I click on Z, you'll see this goes back down. But theoretically, I should be able to either, you know, at a bare minimum, just update this portion of the page, which is what I'm going to do. And I have myself set up for it pretty well, because right now, all of these actions, okay, are, all of these actions are calling this contact page, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use jQuery to make this call in the background. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, and if I look at my my results page and I look at these links, right? This is the letter menu. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hijack these links, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I don't really have a form that I'm going to submit, and I'm not changing any data, so I don't really need a form. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the links inside of letter menu, and I'm going to hijack them, and I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to do it right in here, and just to sort of start out, I'm going to say letter menu dot click, and again I'm going to put my event handler here, my anonymous function. Okay, do the same thing I did up here. I'm going to say var link equals $this, right? And just to see if I want to sort of keep this thing from doing anything, I'm eventually going to make an Ajax request here, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update this portion of the page. So if I go back here, right, here are contacts. Oh yeah, I have no A contacts, sorry. So if I go in here, that's a little bit interesting, right? Because I wouldn't expect that to work. Let's see if I'm doing something wrong. If I need to save something. No, I'm sorry, it's not A dot letter menu, right? It's going to be UL dot letter menu, and the links are in here. So I was not using the right selector. Now I go in here, and now this should be broken, right? It's not going to do anything because I'm basically hijacking the link, but now I'm not doing anything with it. So what I'm going to do, this is what this is called is the donut hole method. Donut hole method means I'm going to get the entire page back. I'm going to make a request in the background that's basically going to request this. You know, if I look at this link, right, and I'm looking at it on the bottom here. If I look at that link, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call contact page G ascending is true. I'm going to make the request to the server. I'm going to grab the results, and I'm going to pull out just the results here, and I'm going to put it back in the DOM. Okay. It's not the most efficient way, but it's a pretty quick way of doing things. In order to do that, I'm going to put a div here, and I'm going to give it a class of results. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an Ajax request. So how do you make an Ajax request? Well, this is one of the ones, and again, if you look at the documentation, this is one of the ones that doesn't operate on a collection. Okay? If I look under Ajax, I'll find that I could use $.get to make a GET request. Okay, so you see, it's actually jQuery.get, so it's not operating on any collection. It's just $, or jQuery.get. So another thing here is that the $sign is basically points to the same thing as the jQuery object. So if you see code and you see them using jQuery, that's the equivalent of using the $sign. That's the jQuery function. What I could do here is I could do get, and I can just say the URL that I want. And so what happens with an Ajax request is there's a callback function. Again, it's another one of these anonymous functions. There's a callback function, assuming that assuming that you ended up getting a response from the server. So the browser has the ability to make background calls on the server. This is something that's pretty common with applications these days. And so what I can do is I can say $get, okay? And I'm not going to do anything here, but I'll show you that I'm getting the results. I'm going to say link.attribute.href, okay? That's going to make an Ajax request in the background, and I could see that it's going to make it by going in here. If I go back to this page, and I open this up, and I click under XHR, I'll see that it's making the call, right? I mean, it's actually returning the entire page. If I was to go in here and look at the response, this would be the entire page for whatever letter I ended up clicking on. Again, I'm not getting any change to my DOM here because I'm not doing anything with the response, right? So here's M, right? You can see page M ascending is true, right? And again, it's going to keep on doing that because I'm never modifying the DOM. So what I can do is I could actually put a second parameter here, and I like to just do this to make it a little bit clearer, is that here's my GET request, and then I'm going to put in a second parameter, which is going to be a callback. So again, let's say that this event that was happening on the server was taking, 30 seconds to run. An Ajax request is asynchronous. This will end up getting called, and this next line will end up getting called. That's something that we could demonstrate. But the callback function, again, we don't control this. This is just how you could do this without using jQuery. You could do that internally. It's being done with a XML HTTP request object. It's not the hardest code to do, but it's a heck of a lot easier with jQuery. But what will happen is that when this is successful, when it's assuming that there's no errors on the server, okay, we could get our HTML back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on our page, okay? So I'm going to use the $sign, okay? And I'm going to find our div results, okay? And I'm going to, one of the things that I could do is I could say, hey, look, replace it. Yeah, that'll work. I could say, replace it with, okay? I don't want to replace it with the entire HTML. I could do that, right? So the other thing that right now I'm getting back HTML from the server. This is going to look a little funky, right? I'm going to get back HTML from the server. If I put this entire HTML in here, I would get something that looks like this, right? More. See, my menu keeps on showing up. That's obviously not what I want. I basically just want to get this portion and put it in. So I don't want the entire HTML. What I can do is I could take the HTML and say, hey, look, do me a favor and find div.results. So this is what I'm getting back from the server. This is the new data, okay? And I'm replacing it with, I'm replacing what's down here with that new data. And I'm going to save it. It's going to be a little problematic, and I'll show you why in a second. But if I go in here, and let's say that you were testing this out. Let's see how this would work. So here's my contacts, right? I'm on A. I go in here, okay? I click on I. Looks pretty good, right? It's in ascending order. That looks good, okay? Was it an Ajax request? Let's see. Let's make our browser a little bit smaller, okay, and move this down and see if this, this menu stays in the same spot. Does, okay, looks pretty good, right? And you could say, oh, that's working. And let's click on it again to do it in descending order, okay? Now, it gave it to us in descending order, but you could see it actually wasn't an Ajax request, right? Again, it's a little subtle here. First time, it's an Ajax request. Second time, you're going to see a jump. Okay? Why does that happen? Well, what ends up happening is when you end up wiring up events with jQuery, okay, what happens is it wires up the events that it finds when the DOM loads. When you end up loading things asynchronously, or you load things later on after this gets called, you would have to call this again. You'd have to say, hey, look, those new links that you now loaded, I want them to also have this behavior. There's an interesting thing that you could do. You could actually say, hey, look, don't do click. You could say live or live. And you could say, and that means, hey, look, I'm going to have to actually put my click in here. And the way that this reads is that with any of these things, if they're on the page now or they get added to the DOM later on, I still want this to work. Okay? And so we're adding things dynamically to the DOM, but we want to make sure that this ends up still working. So I could save this. Okay? And if I go back here, right, now I should be able to test this out by saying X, X, and I can see it's doing this correctly, right? Seem to lose it on the queue. I'm not sure why that is. Let's see why that is. It's a little bit odd. Let's see. Here's M. Here's M. Here's M. That seems to be an Ajax request. That seems to work. I don't know. Seems to be doing Ajax request, which is what I want it to do. So again, I'm just hijacking the link to make an Ajax request. And the reason why I call this the donut hole method is that it's getting back a lot of stuff, but I'm basically just grabbing. I'm actually grabbing most of it, right? Because I'm actually grabbing everything that's inside of this div class results. But, I'm not grabbing the menu. If there was other stuff that was on the page, I'm not grabbing that. So again, this would make more sense if you had a bunch of different grids on the page that you wanted to sort independently. It's also interesting too. I think my delete, if I look at this, I'm probably going to want to do the live with my delete as well. Although, you know what? I don't have to. Actually, another thing about it, because the delete's not making an Ajax request. Although, let's see what happens here. I bet you I do have to do it. I bet you there's a case where you could see this. If I end up clicking on G, I think it's definitely a little weird with this. See if I could replicate that. Here's F. It looks like it's definitely jumping. Here's F. Here's G. I don't know if I'm just losing it or what. Making an Ajax request. One way you could also tell whether or not the page is totally reloading is to put, an alert box on the page when it reloads. But I could have sworn it. I really felt like it was. But if I go over here and I click on contact, and then I'm making an Ajax request here. If I go to delete, oh no, that's not going to matter, right? Let me think for a second. My other, I might. Let's see. I bet you will. If I click on delete, okay, I get can't be found. So it's a little bit subtle, but again, if I end up wiring up this delete link, right, this post link, I wire it up, right, and then I end up adding things to the DOM dynamically. I really want to be, you don't want to put this in gratuitously, but if you're going to be adding these elements dynamically, instead of saying click, you can say live, click. Okay? And now if I go back here, I should be able to test this out by going in and let's see, I'm here, I'm making an Ajax request. I'm going to scroll down, right? And again, this is not going to be an Ajax request, but I am going to hijack the link. And it's going to delete that first item. Okay? So again, I can make a change here, and I can delete. Now, eventually, it would be a nice thing to do. It could be a good assignment, is to have this delete do an Ajax request. And in essence, what you could do is you could do your post. You could basically, you could end up doing a post, and you could find out the row that you're on, and you could delete that row dynamically. That's one way that you could go about doing that. Probably wouldn't be the worst thing to do. But I could leave that as an assignment, or the next time we meet, we could take a look at that. So the donut hole method is not the greatest thing to do. What I would much rather do is I have this action here called, I put this in last time, which is the results action, right? We're calling it now, where if we end up passing in our model to the results action, we could basically just get the results, and we don't have to do any of the donut hole. So, it's actually a pretty easy fix to do that. I mean, the way that I could do that is that instead of calling index here, okay, I could call results, okay? And if I do that, now, look, if I go to run this, it would probably work fine now if I did this, but in the end, what I just want to show you here is that if I make this call now, if I go in here and I click over here, welcome to our listing page. Okay, what broke over there? Here are results. Yeah, let's see what I know what I did. Sorry about that. Here's our index page. That looks right. Render action results. Action link results. Take a quick break and see what I did wrong. Yeah, I actually found out what that was. It sort of makes sense, right? Because it's actually getting my callback. The problem is there's nothing wrong with calling this action. So I went in here, and instead of having these links call index, I have it calling results. The problem is that when I end up getting results back, this div that I'm looking for here, which is the results div, doesn't exist in the results. So the problem is this. If I ended up going in and debugging this, I would find out that it's not going to find this. What I really need to do is, now I've got exactly what I want. I've got my results. I don't need to do replace with, right? What I really want to do is to basically, I'm gonna actually comment this out so you have it here. Okay, so that's the donut hole method. But now, if I'm basically just getting exactly what I want, I could say div.results.html. Here's the HTML, right? And so now it's going to give this to me. All my event handlers are still going to work because, I'm using that live and, modifying the DOM. So here's my XHR request, right here, my X values. Here are my W values. And it's more efficient. If you actually look at what's coming back from these, you'll see that all I'm getting is, the stuff that's inside of the results view, right? So the issue here was that I was trying to look for a div that didn't exist. And, ideally, probably what you would do is maybe you would make these calls. You would, the only thing you really need to do is get the results. But I also want to make sure that I have some functionality that I put in here that I don't want to lose. That, when you click twice on this, it, changes the sort order. Or else maybe I could have kept this menu, from reloading every time. But, that I think that sort of does it with what I wanted to look at in terms of jQuery at the moment. We're going to look at it a lot more because, again, what I'm doing here with this class is I want to make sure that we're combining Ajax-enabled MVC applications. So MVC applications, they're, you just want to sort of build things up slowly. Again, the way that I always like to think about things is always to just start off with my entity class or my model class. And a lot of times just think about, if I have a view, what I need to have, in the view. You struggle sometimes with the routing and that sort of thing. I've shown you that before. But, the sort of last thing that I would probably do is going to be the JavaScript, because that's really where you could sort of trip yourself up early on. The nice thing that I do like about this is that I can go and test the one thing I like about having that results action is that I can test it. I mean, literally, you could go in here and say, is that results action going to work? Let me actually fix that. It's going to be contact. It's not going to be page A because that's not going to work with the routing. Although I bet I could probably get it to work with the routing. I don't really need to because that's not. I have no need for a vanity link there, right? Because this is not something that someone's going to look at in the URL. But contact results, right? If I say ascending is true, right, this is going to give me my A value. I have nothing in there, so I'm not going to get any results. Also, wouldn't be a bad idea to have a message that says that handles that if you don't have any results. So if there was a couple of things I think that you could work on, is one of them being, let's just make a couple of notes here, depending on how much time you guys have left. One of them would be a message if no results. Although the only time that's going to be an issue is with the letter A, frankly, because the other ones you can't even click on. And you can make them clickable if you want to, and you could have some indication that there aren't going to be results. But that's something you could put in and delete all the stuff from the letter A and make sure that that works. The other thing you could also do is you could make the delete an Ajax request. And in order to do that, I mean, in the end, what you're going to do, you could hijack the link, and you could do, you know, instead of having a form submission, right, you could do $.post, which is going to be an Ajax post request, so it's going to be treated on the server like a form submission. And you could get the URL, okay, and in your callback, there's a couple of different things you could do. I mean, I think the thing that the sort of easiest thing to do is you might not even worry about the data that you get back, but what you can do inside here is if you have your link that ends up getting clicked on, which you do, you have your post link, you can move up the tree and find the TR and remove it from the DOM. Okay, you can even remove it slowly. The other thing that we'll work on in the next class is actually doing some messaging and stuff like that when things get deleted and things get updated. But that's about it for now, and I'll see you guys soon.